Well, for the last 36 hours or so, the rumors have been going around now that Kennedy has been extended for another 3 years. Don't quite know if it's true or not. It could be, and I could have been wrong all this time, but maybe for all the right reasons, or maybe right for all the wrong reasons. I don't know. Let's talk about it. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. And before I get into this, I just want to say thank you to everybody out there. Just last night, this is Tuesday evening I'm recording this, Tuesday afternoon I'm recording this video. So Monday evening on November 15th, we hit 2,000 subs. I appreciate you so much. I cannot thank you enough. People have really been enjoying this channel. And on that note, what they have been enjoying is that we try to put stories like we're about to talk about here with Kathleen Kennedy kind of through the business lens to talk about things in terms of what they might mean instead of just taking them on face value. So let's jump into this. I'm going to set this up, and then, of course, my buddy Kamran Pasha is going to be here to have a conversation after we lay out all the facts, up to this point, what we do know and what we've talked about up to this point. And then we're going to talk about kind of where this goes from here or what some of this might mean because, of course, the reason we bring Kamran on here is because Kamran is a Hollywood guy, right? He's a screenwriter. He's actually written for Disney television shows before. So this is why we like having Kamran on. He can give us some of that inside baseball knowledge when it comes to how some of these things work, which is where, I try to shape some of the business opinions on this around because it's always good to have somebody that can kind of tailor that into how things work in Hollywood. So let's talk about this for a second. And for the purposes of discussion, we're going to assume at this point that this is correct. And look, folks, it may well be. My contention at this point, of course, is that this is coming from places like Screen Rant, Collider, The Direct. I think the original source was Matthew Baloney with, is it Puck? I want to make sure I get that right. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, sir, if you're watching. I know you're probably not. But my apologies if I made a mistake on that one. Point being, though, is that I'm not seeing anything, at least as of the time I'm recording this, and this is 5 o'clock Central Standard Time right now, on Tuesday, November 16th, I see nothing from the Hollywood Holy Trinity. I see nothing from Variety or Deadline or The Hollywood Reporter at this point, confirming any of this or digging this up. Of course, in 2018, the last time Kathy was renewed, it was leaked to Deadline, if I'm not mistaken, around September, about 32 days before her renewal. And of course, a lot of rumors started percolating up in the last several weeks when October 30th came and went, and nothing was said. So we knew at some point somebody was going to get something out there, and this is where we're at. And even her husband, Frank Marshall, retweeted a retweet of a retweet, I think I got that right, on Twitter, showing one of these stories. It might have been from Screen Rant or Collider. I don't really remember, but there you go. That's Frank. You can go look it up on Twitter for yourself if you like. So let's talk about this. Let's go back through this. And, right off the bat, hell, I could be dead wrong. I could have been dead wrong about her getting let go, but for the right reasons, meaning, all the business metrics, which is what I want to talk about now to set this up, all the business metrics suggest that she absolutely should have been let go when this contract came up on October 30th. And if she's still there, then let's try to put the pieces together on what it could mean or why this might have happened. So first of all, let's be clear. These contracts, when they're signed, right, all these things in Hollywood for the most part, as is in many cases with big business, are under strict NDAs, that is non-disclosure agreements, meaning the details of these contracts really never get made public. You might find out a little smidgen of something here and there, like the fact that it lasts 3 years. We can determine that. But in terms of what she's getting paid, or what the performance stipulations are, if there's bonuses or so on and so forth, or what she has to do, what her duties are, what she can do, what she can't do, which may have changed this time. All those things are usually sealed. We'll never really know. But we can look at some of the news items that we've seen, some of the things that have been confirmed, especially in the last few months, and try to start putting these pieces together. So let's draw a picture. So October 30th, 2012, Lucasfilm was sold to Disney. Okay, we all remember that. Kathleen Kennedy came along with the deal, and her contract, 3 years, renewed in 2015, renewed again in 2018, and now, presumably, resumed again in 2021, to my shock and dismay. from a business perspective. So, what is going on right now? Well, we know that we've had 3 sequel trilogy films to this point, the first of which made $2 billion. Disney made some profit on that for sure. They probably took home around $1 billion of that $2 billion in terms of what they took home after they shared their portion with the theatrical exhibitors that put the movie out there. Of course, they had production budget costs. They had global marketing, or P&A, print and advertising. They had interest costs. They had participation costs with the actors, the producers, the directors, so on and so forth, people like J.J. Abrams. And Disney walked home with a good profit. Then we had the second movie, The Last Jedi, which was an unmitigated disaster for a multitude of reasons, which dropped almost in half at the box office. And then, of course, The Rise of Palpatine, which dropped down, barely limped over $1 billion, and may have just broken even, maybe given Disney a tiny bit of profit, but not a whole lot, based on the production budget of that movie and the fact, and this is more important, that that was one of the 3 films that had gross production budget overruns thanks to complete and utter mismanagement, financial mismanagement by Kathleen Kennedy. This happened with The Rise of Palpatine. This happened with Solo. This happened with Rogue One, which Rogue One I happen to enjoy, I think, as a lot of people did. It was probably the favorite of the Disney Star Wars movies out there because it felt the most Star Wars. But Solo, Rogue One, these movies suffered the same problem that Kennedy has had on a number of occasions, where they get through a significant portion of filming and principal photography, and then she fires the writers and directors, brings in all new people, and basically shoots entirely new movies. These things have costs, and they have costs to the tune of, over the course of 3 movies like this, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least $100 million between the 3 of them. But I have a feeling we're closing in on the multiple level of that 100 when you're talking about 3 films of this scale. Not to mention the fact merchandise sales for the stuff that came out of these movies cratered. That is why you don't see sequel trilogy merchandise really anymore, with rare exception. By comparison, original Star Wars merch, Mandoverse merch like Grogu, stuff like this, those are the hot selling items. And those are the things that really they weren't Kennedy pieces, right? That was either Lucas back from original trilogy, or Favreau is responsible really at this point for Mando and the Mandoverse. And I think people know this. So here's a list of all the projects right now in terms of theatrical projects that Kathleen Kennedy has in the works for Star Wars. That's it. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. There's nothing. Let's think back. 4 years ago, we heard about this Rian Johnson trilogy. That's nowhere. It's not going anywhere. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's not going anywhere apart from Rian Johnson talking on some Zoom call interview with some nobody about, I don't know what. It's nonsense. It's not going anywhere. We had the Benioff and Weiss trilogy that was supposed to happen. That's not happening. And then we were told about The Acolyte was leaked out, and that's not happening. Why? Because The Acolyte was tied to yet another failed financial failure for Kathleen Kennedy, which was The High Republic, which was supposed to replace The Old Republic, which, by the way, didn't we start hearing rumors about an Old Republic series or show or movie or something they're working on now? Wait, I thought The Old Republic was gone. I thought Kathy got rid of The Old Republic and replaced it with The High Republic. Thank you, Towley. Yeah, I thought that was replaced, but now we're hearing about Old Republic stuff again. That's funny. That's funny. Why did we renew her? Why renew KK? All her stuff is going away. Oh, that's neither here nor there. So, in any case, all these things that we have out there that she was supposed to be in charge of seem to be going by the wayside, and now you can add Rogue Squadron to the list. And you can go back and watch the video that we did on that last week. It's almost at 2,500 views, which for my channel is great. So I appreciate you guys. You apparently really loved that video. So we're going to have Kamran back here again today to talk about some of this stuff. So, any case, when you look at all this from the business standpoint, you have to ask yourself, why? What is going on with this? How is this woman still getting renewed? And then it hit me. Something that I myself have said for the last several months. Kathleen Kennedy was never going to get fired. This was never going to be a humiliating event for her. In fact, she's too well connected in Hollywood, especially with her husband, Frank Marshall. These people are Hollywood royalty, and they have to be protected to an extent. Part of this may be, if we look at this now and we have to say to ourselves, we really have to question I mean, legitimately have to question, based on all the actual empirical data that we have, all the evidence we have, how much control does Kathleen Kennedy really have over Star Wars? I mean, yeah, she's still going to get her name up there as executive producer on all these Star Wars projects, but that's just based on the mere fact that she is indeed the president of Lucasfilm. She's head of the studio. And if I'm not mistaken, the PGA, that's the Producers Guild, their rules state you're head of a studio, you get executive producer credits. Doesn't mean that you did a damn thing on the movie. It's like right now, Steven Spielberg is still going to be listed as a producer on Indiana Jones. Steven Spielberg has nothing to do with that movie at all. He's walked away. He's washed his hands of it. He still gets executive producer credits because it's Indiana Jones. It's like the same thing with George Lucas, for that matter. So there's a lot of little rules and tricks about there you have to understand. But as far as this goes, I have to ask myself, how is it that it flies in the face of everything we know about Bob Chapek up to this point, who has done a lot of executive restructuring at ESPN, at Hulu, at ABC, at FX. We've had these stories come out in Variety, Deadline, and Hollywood Reporter, the major publications in Hollywood. We've had these come out just in the last couple of months. He is making these changes everywhere. So why then, a guy who has publicly stated he hates these long-term contracts, does not want these long-term contracts, and has started changing this at other Disney studio elements, and then over here at Lucasfilm, we get this. Well, then it occurs to me that this might just be Kathy's golden parachute that I talked about for the last several months, that she was going to be getting some sort of whopping golden parachute to go away quietly. This contract renewal might be it, whereas it's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but it's a dog with no teeth at the end of the day, to where she really has very little control over the studio, and that she's basically going to collect a paycheck to sit home and keep her name up there to keep everything nice, quiet, and happy, while other more capable people like Favreau are going to be show running the shows for Star Wars. Like I said, it's no accident, I don't think, that all of these film projects that she's had in the works, in her mind at least, have basically been relegated to the trash can. You can say delay or creative differences and delayed indefinitely. What that usually means is it's gone. It's not going to happen unless it gets radically altered to something that looks nothing like it was first intended to look at some point down the road. That is a possibility. But why would Chapek sign a 3-year contract like this? And then it hits me again. There is still a person at Disney that outranks Bob Chapek. And that same person is a very dear friend of Kathleen Kennedy's. That same person has renewed her twice before, once in 2015, and then inexplicably after that in 2018, after the complete failures of The Last Jedi and Solo. And that's the executive chairman and chairman of the board of the Walt Disney Company, Robert Iger, Bob Chapek's predecessor at the CEO position. Because you see, at this point, the CEO, Bob Chapek, still answers to Iger. Why? Because any CEO in corporate America still serves at the pleasure and the discretion of the board, and especially of the chairman. So while the investors do have some pull, and while the investors do have some say, Bob Iger is still there until December 31st of this year. And this might have been Bob Iger's last act for his dear friend Kathy and Frank. At least that's what I can see. At least that's what I can think. Let me put it that way. Is that this may put Kennedy in control, quote unquote, of Lucasfilm for the next 3 years, but without her being able to do much of anything, at least not with Star Wars. She might get to work on some of the smaller projects like the Willow TV show, but as far as creative input and creative control, I suspect that her fangs have been largely removed. So anyway, without further ado, let's talk about this. And let's see what a Hollywood insider thinks, and I can put my business brain with his Hollywood brain, and his lawyer brain, by the way, and come up with something. Here we go. Here's Kamran Pasha. All right, folks, so as promised, you have heard the setup for this, and now we are having the conversation with my good buddy over here, Kamran Pasha, because I love to bring you the business and financial side of things. Kamran is bringing you the professional Hollywood side of things as somebody, as I mentioned in the intro, who is a quote unquote Hollywood insider, somebody who has worked in this world, somebody, in fact, who has worked for Disney, if I'm not mistaken, on a television show.
Some interesting Machiavellian politics at Disney, which I'll discuss.
Yes. So, I mean, who better to bring on for this kind of conversation about Disney than somebody who has been exactly in this position before with Disney professionally on the production side. Mm-hmm. So, Kamran, everybody at this point has kind of heard the setup, the thesis, just we're having some thoughts, and all this is just, we're having a conversation to try to come up with some ideas from a professional business standpoint, why this might have happened, if in fact it did, and that's still in question, because again, we have not seen this from the major trades in Hollywood, but this is where we are. And I will add one final thing, Kamran, and then I want to let you go on this. And this is what I think was also, this makes me chuckle that I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, was the fact that we just had Disney Plus Day on Friday, November 12th, just a couple of days ago. And suspiciously, there was no Star Wars properties mentioned at all. At all. I mean, even, and I will say this, I found was interesting, even the Book of Boba Fett itself, which is absolutely done in the can and is coming out December 29th, I think, on Disney Plus. Even that was really not in the mention. I think they had a Boba Fett like behind the scenes or making of show, but the show itself was off the rails. It was not in there. It seemed to me, my opinion, that was a deliberate avoidance of discussing anything having to do with Star Wars.
You can't ask questions about Kathleen Kennedy if you don't put Star Wars out there.
Exactly. Even the shows that we know are coming. Like they didn't even put a date on there for Obi-Wan, if I'm not mistaken. There was nothing. It was a deliberate avoidance by Disney to just, we're not talking about this. And we've had these conversations with Kennedy's contract sitting on Chapek's desk, collecting dust. Nothing has come out until now, until this weekend. And I have this actually begs even more questions. I know there's some YouTubers out there that want to say, see, I told you so. Kennedy's getting renewed. It doesn't matter. And that's fine. I'm happy to admit I'm wrong.
I can have that opinion, but
I want to have a deeper dive on this as far as if this is true, why? Let's talk about the business aspects of this.
And in what way would it be
here
true?
For. So
and
go on.
Would it be true? Because you say if this is true, then the question becomes, well, what is true of that if it is true? So we can get to that as well, right? All right. So I understand your thesis. It's a very interesting theory that it's actually Bob Iger behind all of this. So let me go with that.
At least in part.
Okay, let's go with that for a second. Because I have my own theories about all of this, and I have a bigger, broader theory which I'm going to share with your viewers. But it's okay. So let's go with that track. So let's say that happened, and it's plausible. As you've noted, he is still the executive chairman, the chairman of the board. The CEO serves at the pleasure of the board of directors, right? And there seems to be a lot of indications that maybe Bob Chapek wasn't necessarily the board's first choice, but he was jostled in by certain investors, right? Certainly wasn't Iger's choice. It wasn't Iger's protege, right? It wasn't part of Iger's club. So that's certainly there. And we have heard for some time, at least for the last several months, right after that Atlantic article that we talked about in the past that anointed Jon Favreau as the savior of Star Wars, when I had come out and said publicly, this is it, she's done, she's finished, right?
Right.
Atlantic.
And I agreed with you.
Yeah. And so, and after that, I started hearing stories that Bob Iger really wasn't appearing at the meetings anymore. The old meetings that he would sit in as the shadow CEO, right? And dominate things and not let Chapek speak or say, well, Bob, I think we're going to do it this way, right? And so not really let the CEO be the CEO. So I've been hearing for some months that after that, over the summer, he started not appearing in a lot of those. And he was sort of fading to the background. But he's still there. He's still there. And he's certainly, I'm sure that he hasn't been delighted to see Mr. Chapek assert himself over the last 9 months and push him into the shadows. I think Mr. Iger, it's like that thing. Bill Clinton loves to be at the center. He just loves to be campaigning. He loves to be on the stage. Mr. Iger loves to be on stage, right? And I don't think he liked being this guy that was just supposed to be his sidekick with a title, actually asserting the role of the title. So I'm sure there's the personal dynamics involved there. So let's say that the events that are being reported in the fan press right now, at least I don't know when this video will premiere. Maybe there will be a trade report by the time this premieres. But as of the moment we're recording, there's been no trade acknowledgement, even of this conversation.
Should be Wednesday morning. And I did acknowledge that in the intro leading into this, to where, as of 5 o'clock Central Standard Time on Tuesday, November 16th, when I recorded the intro, it is now 7:47 p.m. on Tuesday, Central Standard Time, November 7th or 16th, excuse me. There has still been no major Holy Trinity THR deadline variety confirmation of this.
Yeah, and
that's where we are now
news.
as of the time of this recording.
It is. I mean, so let's just talk about that, and then we'll talk about your thesis. So already that's a problem, and I've seen a lot of our colleagues on the YouTube world and a lot of the fans outraged, or some people clapping in triumph because they got what they wanted. I'm not sure anybody got anything here, because nothing is real in the industry until the trades reported, and because the trades are the mouthpieces of the system. They're not. They do some investigative reporting, but for the most part, they serve essentially as reprinters of press release, and often as chess pieces in political games, as Mr. Chapek has done with the Hollywood Reporter in particular, has used them to get his point of view out there in particular. So if someone as important to the Hollywood club as Kathleen Kennedy has been renewed for 3 years, that's worthy of not just a line in the trades, that's worthy of a major spread. That's worthy of a conversation about her legacy and where does it go from here. That's worthy of a lot of conversation. And the trades are very snobby about holding information to themselves. The idea that they could be scooped by various gaming websites and various fan websites. It could be, and actually one of the people that put this information out, someone that had been fired by the trades. He was one of the editors of the Hollywood Reporter, being let go. So that would be quite embarrassing for the Hollywood Reporter to have somebody they let go suddenly scoop them. And even when something is scooped, the general practice of the trades are, even if they're competing with each other, Deadline and Hollywood Reporter are two different companies. Deadline and Variety are part of Penske, the same company. So they're not really competing. They have different foci. But you have the Hollywood Reporter. So when the Hollywood Reporter scoops them, it's just general practice. The Deadline will say first reported by Hollywood Reporter. They'll acknowledge it, and vice versa. That their competitor got it first, but they'll always follow up on it. They won't pretend it's not there. That's
what I find so uncanny and strange on this, is that we haven't got these from the major trades. We're almost 48 hours into this story looping around, which the first one I saw was on, I think it's The Direct, which is a website that, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe it's Puck, the guy Matthew Baloney, who I think is the guy that used to be an editor at THR.
Yes,
this is why this thing got picked up and circulated hard, because people look at this as, okay, this is a guy that should be in the know, that used to be at THR, the Hollywood Reporter folks out there, one of the Holy Trinity, but he's not anymore. This seems like a little low ball for this to start there,
and then to not be, again, when the trades are scooped, they need to get the information out. They can't have people going to a competing website. So they have to put the information out as quickly as possible, and then normally credit the original scoop, right? So even and sometimes they will scoop, this came out, although it's relatively uncommon when news is revealed outside the trades, because the trades are the system's method of getting information out. So it's really uncommon for news to come out otherwise. But normally they would, if some other website or Entertainment Weekly broke it or Vanity Fair broke it, they would credit Vanity Fair. So, and even if they're resentful that somebody they fired, Hollywood Reporter would follow up on this story, because it's a story. It's a real story. It's a big story. And the fact that as of today, as we're recording, there's still silence is not normal. And and the idea that this gentleman who was released from the Hollywood Reporter, this is what I think happened, if I may give my perception, right? And we can still tie it back to your belief that Mr. Iger is involved. He's still
please go ahead. That's what you're here for. Do it.
So this gentleman obviously worked at the Hollywood Reporter, so he has relationships from the industry, and I'm sure he has ways to be in touch with Kathleen Kennedy, or more importantly, for her to be in touch with him. So I believe the reason this is not in the trades as of now is because there's been a blanket silence order from Disney to the trades. We're not going to be talking about this. Whatever arrangement, and we'll talk about what those possible arrangements could be with Miss Kennedy. Whatever arrangement would come to Kennedy, this is not the time for any of us to be talking about it, because it's just not the right time with the recent problems with the stock prices. We don't want to agitate the fan base, because they are very aware that the fan base will, exactly as has happened in the last 48 hours, been very agitated. And so, which is not useful for them. For that narrative is something they can't control when it gets to the fans. It was better to just keep it ambiguous as long as possible, right?
I agree. Because we have not heard anything since October 30th. It's been dead silence. And again, as a reminder to people out there, in 2018, We knew 32 days in advance. September 28th, news dropped on Deadline. It was leaked to Deadline, and it wasn't an official Disney press release that Kennedy had been renewed. We got all the way up and through October 30th and still chirping crickets. That was it.
Yeah. So this gentleman who left, my understanding, he left on good terms. I think he was let go. I think he had issues with the editorial decisions on how to report. And I'll talk about the editorial decisions of how to report, which I think have been used to the advantage of Bob Chapek, right? But he left. And so, but he still has contacts. He was there for a while. And, he I'm sure he has contacts. And more importantly, people know how to contact him. I'm not familiar with his website. I hadn't really heard of his work. But, with the trades doing what I believe is following a blanket order of silence, right, from Disney, saying we're not going to, and Disney in particular, but all the studios do, embargoes, but even more than embargoes, they do. You're not going to talk about this topic.
Oh, yeah. Disney loves their NDAs, like so many companies do, the non-disclosure agreements. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm sure whatever understanding was reached with Ms. Kennedy has an NDA in it. But setting that aside, so now she was not able to get information even like she did 3 years ago. Even the press release didn't come out, but she was able to, through Lucasfilm's PR head, who is now left, she was able to get it into Deadline, right? Despite the Disney was at the time trying to keep it quiet. At least they wouldn't support it with a press release. Now, even the trades are not saying anything. So I'm sure this rankled her. I'm sure this really got under her skin that she can't, for 3 weeks now, she's had to listen to people saying, I think she's fired. I think they have to listen to this stuff. And whatever her arrangement is, she's like, I want to talk about this and I want to shut these people down, right? And trades won't let me do it. So who's that guy in the Rolodex that guy who used to be the Hollywood Reporter? He's got a site. Let's give it to him. He's going to want to scoop his and he is not on the radar of the industry right now. I'm not familiar with that site. I'm not familiar with talk.
I'm not either. And I think given who he is, I think your theory is at least perfectly plausible. Considering what we know about her, because I said, the only way that this has happened, especially for 3 years, is that this is some kind of golden parachute for her that we have discussed for months that she would definitely get a golden parachute. The question became what it would be
and what the terms would be and the length and all of that. So she was whatever her golden parachute, and I still believe this arrangement is a golden parachute, right? Whatever.
As do I.
So we'll find out eventually. But the fact that she can't even put it out there must rankle her, especially when there's all this online mockery for weeks now saying, "Oh, look, they all whether people want to admit it or not, people are watching Midnight's Edge. They're watching, Doomcock and other channels. They're watching your channel, right? I'm sure they're watching the channel because you're doing financial analysis, which they need to know. Does he understand what's going on, right? So they're watching. And so even Ms. Kennedy.
Maybe. I hope they are. That'd be great, but I don't know.
God bless you.
Just a little guy.
Keep watching Battle Renegade. You should. But they are watching select sites. And even Ms. Kennedy is aware to her frustration of certain sites, right, who have openly criticized her. She's probably aware of me by name at this point. I've met her once 20 years ago. She wouldn't have remembered that, right? But she probably, who's this screenwriter that won't shut his mouth up, right? I mean, she probably knows who I am at this point. But I'm sure it got under her skin for weeks now of hearing this and then being unable to speak and the trades refusing to run it. Okay. Then she's like, all right, let's go with this guy who's being the trades. And it'll get out. But it didn't get out because nobody follows that. Nobody in the industry follows that. So what does she have to have? She has to have her husband retweet it. Otherwise, no one's paying attention. Suddenly, Frank Marshall retweets this, and then it becomes, well, look at that. And I've met Mr. Marshall. I like Mr. Marshall, right? He's a very good producer, and he was a gentleman. I've met him a couple of times. He's a gentleman, and he's a very nice guy. And I've heard very gracious things about him. But he's also a family man. He's got a wife. And I understand he knows the difficulties.
Kathy is his wife. Yeah.
Kathy's his wife. He knows the difficulties her relationships have been. Let's just put it that way. He knows the challenges of her relationships with various people. And so
including Spielberg.
Including Spielberg. They work together. the logical thing is, all right, honey, fine. I'll put it out. Nobody's noticing this. Nobody's paying any attention to this because I didn't even know about this.
And he didn't comment. And I said this in the intro, Cameron. I don't think I mentioned this earlier. Was basically Frank Marshall retweeted a retweet of a tweet.
Yeah.
And without comment.
Yeah, just put it out there because
it was it was incredibly cryptic.
but it's enough to serve what it did, which is
exactly
feeding frenzy of, well, here's Frank Marshall, top producer, husband of Kathleen Kennedy, affirming of who's going to know more than Kathleen.
That was my reaction.
Who knows her private life? It's him. So of course
said,
that was
put
that out there but if she said, look, honey, no one is hearing this story that I want them to hear. You need to let them know. And he goes, all right, baby, I'll put this out there, right? And he does, and it serves its purpose, but it creates a tidal wave that I think is going to have some very interesting ramifications that are, I think it's going to change the chessboard that Chapek has been playing on with Miss Kennedy for some time. Because again, she's not a chess player. She goes by old Hollywood club rules, which are, this kind of basic manipulation, but he's many steps ahead. So when this happens, it throws a wrench in his plans, because I think his plans are very clear. It's been give her some kind of settlement, some kind of golden parachute, maybe let her keep her title for X number of time, maybe even a title for potentially a couple of years or whatever, but just keep her quiet and off the board. And suddenly she's announced this through her proxies, right? And her husband is promoting it. And when I saw the Frank Marshall tweet, I was like, look, Frank, you are an A-list powerful producer. Why are you retweeting this rando site? All you have to do is get on the phone with the editor-in-chief of Variety, and it'll be a Variety spread tomorrow that my wife got a 3-year contract. I mean, you can't just call Variety to do this piece that they're refusing to do. Why are you retweeting this rando site? Why? It's because he knows Variety ain't going to put that out there, because that's against the orders that Chapek has put, right? So he's just got to, okay, baby, I put this out. We're done. And it started this tidal wave action. And so, predictably, people who don't understand the inner dynamics of the industry, and often who are very loud on YouTube, are either screaming in horror or cheering in triumph over this very basic manipulation that Miss Kennedy, I believe, has done, which is she put it out there to a random site where nobody noticed it. She got her husband to promote it, and that set it in motion. And yet still, there is no comment from the trades. And so,
and just real quick, so everybody understands, you bring up an interesting point about, why couldn't he have just picked up the phone and do this? Why wouldn't they do it? Why wouldn't they being the holy trinity of Hollywood publications that we mentioned before, why wouldn't they pick up on this and try to confirm it? And they still may. That's possible. That's always in the realm of possibility. However, at this point, like you said, as far as why Frank Marshall couldn't pick up the phone, we talk about how these critics, these professional critics and reviewers, they jump on Rotten Tomatoes and they say nice things about these Marvel movies up until this point with the Eternals. And they salivate over it and all this kind of stuff. A lot of these people, they don't want to lose their access. They don't want to lose their goodie bags. They don't want to lose their invitations to the schwanky parties and stuff like this. And these people in Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, no different. They don't want to lose that access. And if
the access at that level is you're not gonna get the press pass to the high level party. It's not gonna be, you're not gonna come to the premiere. We're not gonna let you speak to Gal Gadot on her next movie.
Right. We're not gonna they don't want to pee in the cornflakes over at Disney and do something that's like, if we put this out, we might get cut off.
And Disney does that. Disney is known to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
If you go against their PR narrative, they will cut you down, and everyone in the journalistic industry knows that.
Yeah, unless they tell you that we want you to put this story out.
Correct, and because that's
as we have seen this year.
The trades are not independent. So, they are not. They never have been independent news sources. They are mouthpieces of the power players, and the power players shift. Right. And so all right. So that is what I believe happened here. Could Bob Iger be behind it? He may very well have been behind the scenes of whatever that settlement was. He may have come and said, okay, Bob, I know you're, as Chapek. All right, little Bob, I know you don't want to sign that thing, but she's my buddy. She's my buddy, and we have long history together, and you just get it done. Give her the money, give her dignity, and just let it go. You're already taking everything away from her, Bobby. You've taken everything away from her. You've taken her shows away from her, right? You got the original showrunner of Obi-Wan that she loved, the Oscar-winning, Hussein Amini. She got him fired and replaced by one of these Chapek. One of these Jon Favreau, supported guys, right? So you got everything you wanted, right? So just let her have her dignity. Let her rest in peace, okay? And
that was my impression.
Yeah.
That was my impression with it, is that, Chapek, or excuse me, Bob Iger is still executive chairman and chairman of the board through December 31st of this year. He still has power,
Yeah,
and a lot of it.
and a
And
practical
and
thing
and this
is,
could have been, and we have seen the disputes publicly
Yeah.
in the trade magazines, in the financial magazines, where Bob Chapek comes out and says, this stuff with long-term contracts and all this with the upper level Disney executives, this is going to change. We're restructuring, and we have seen evidence of it. We just within the last month, maybe 6 weeks, how much of the executive and corporate restructuring has happened at ABC, ESPN, Hulu, so on and so forth. A lot of executive change-ups over there, promotions, retirements. We have seen a lot of Chapek's folks like Alan Horn and many others at the executive Disney level. They're, of course, and it's not uncommon, they're retiring and following.
You mean Iger's people?
Iger's people, excuse me. Iger. Yeah, I'm sorry. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Iger's people, like Alan Horn, following Iger out the door at the end of this year when he leaves in December, which is not uncommon. But you're seeing this changing of the guard. And I looked at this and I said, all the business stuff that we know about Chapek, unless Chapek has been completely lying this entire time, and everything he said about what he's going to a more distribution-focused model and all this stuff about unless all of that was complete BS and blowing smoke up everybody's skirts. And he's employed this in every other area of Disney so far that has had changes just to fake us out about Kennedy. I don't buy it.
Yeah,
there's something else going on. And like I said before, for months, when Kennedy leaves, she's going to get a gorgeous golden parachute package.
Lots of praise and lots of awards.
Lots of praise. Yeah, all this. I've been very consistent on this. And even Doomcock has said this for many, many months. She's never going to get fired and embarrassed publicly. It's always going to be
So here, now, Valiant, here's what I want to suggest. And I've been talking, first of all, I wrote on my Patreon, as you saw today, I wrote an article about, at first I want to give that I understand the power dynamics of this kind of thing, because I went through this. When I was let go, as I've talked very publicly, I was the head writer of the Tron Uprising animated series, and I was fired midway between because I didn't handle the politics of Disney well. I was too straightforward, and I said, okay, here's the problem, rather than doing what Chapek does, which is go around the problem and strangle the problem from another angle. I was just straightforward, here's a problem. And so I that's just who I am, and that didn't work there, and I was asked to leave. But how was I asked to leave? They said, because at the time, remember, I was a random writer, but I wasn't totally a random writer. I had success, but most importantly, I just had 2 novels published. And so I was getting a lot of PR as a journalist. I was being interviewed all the time. And I was a regular writer or contributor to the Huffington Post. So I had direct access to the media. So they couldn't have somebody like me talking and grumbling in an article that appears in Huffington Post about the problems at Disney, right? That would be a really big problem for them, right? So what they did was this: when it was time, when they told you're going to leave, and you're going to leave now, literally was like, pack up your stuff and you're out in the next hour, right? They said, but just to let you know, we're gonna pay out your entire contract. They still had a year on me.
Oh yeah,
and so they talked to my agents and said, we're just going to pay him. And it wasn't like a lump sum. I got a weekly paycheck like I normally did from Disney for the next year. And I still might have been on their employment roster because they just needed me out of the office.
Right.
So you wanted to bring in a new compliant writer who wouldn't cause problems. And they just needed me to shut up. And that was the thing. You take the money. You're going to still be getting your weekly paycheck to the contract runs
You're
out,
still employed by Disney.
and just go home.
Just go home.
And
what have we been saying about Kennedy? That she's basically been an absentee landlord at Lucasfilm now for the last at least 2 years?
Yeah, and
roughly.
So whatever.
All of her stuff is getting canceled or whatever. You can say that she's doing it. You can say that Chapek's doing it. It doesn't matter. There is nothing of Kathleen Kennedy's.
You might as well go home because
everything. Yeah, everything that is pretty much or as close to being ironclad as possible is things that have been under the purview at this point squarely of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni.
And they seem to be pushing all these delays to redo things. And that's fine. So having been through this, here's your payoff money and be quiet. Having been through this myself, it's not like, well, here's a theoretical thing. I went through this. They gave me a year pay on my contract and just told me to go home and not cause any drama for them. Right? Which is what I did. And so of course, whatever settlement I believe they reach, whether it was 1 year, 3 years, 30 years, whether it's a lifetime annuity, whatever it is that they reach with, it's a just go home and take the money.
Yeah.
And get out of the way.
You can keep your name at the head of Lucasfilm, but effectively you really don't have much control in terms of creativity.
You have no control. Go home.
Yeah.
These two guys are in charge. Like I didn't have any further. I had nothing more to do with Tron the day I walked.
Yeah.
Out. Nothing. I didn't
and that seems much more like of an in this case of an Iger play to me, because they were the friends, and as I said in the intro to this, we all looked on in horror as Kennedy was renewed in 2018 after the failure of Last Jedi. You could see the collapsing box office, the merchandising sales going down the tubes. The fan base at that point had been demolished. And then you had the abysmal financial failure of Solo, which lost money at the box office, no question. And I don't even know if it made a profit on the back end with secondary and tertiary sales, because they shunted everything right away to Disney Plus very shortly. I don't think many people bought the DVDs and Blu-rays. I don't know. But the point is that all of that happened prior to that 2018 renewal. And the only reason I could come up with at that point is, why do you renew somebody who was this much of a failure? And from the standpoint of production management and financial management at a studio, which is what a studio head's supposed to do, to be a good financial manager. And Kathleen Kennedy had failed everything up the way at that point. Why was she then renewed? She's part of the club. Iger's part of the club. Iger, we know, was a consummate Hollywood animal who's even come out and said, like we said before, boy, I sure hope Mr. Chapek doesn't let the math and the numbers and the distribution and, stuff that people actually want to buy, that he hopes Chapek doesn't let that override the creativity.
Which is the joke, because the people that are making these decisions, which are hurting the economics, are not creative people. They think they are. They're deluded, right? They are creative in the sense of creative destruction, right? And so, but that's the part of their talk for themselves.
It's their personal creativity versus creating something A, that's good, and B, that people, excuse me, I shouldn't say people, but the largest audience possible will buy. That's the economy of scale when you're talking about a $300, $400, $500 billion enterprise like the Walt Disney Company.
Correct. And so that too. So I agree. Your theory may very well be right. It may very well been that weeks go by, Kathleen Kennedy's getting increasingly agitated that her lawyer, her people are saying, well, Chapek hasn't responded. We haven't, like what happened to me. I said the same thing happened to me on a project that ended up getting force majeure because of the pandemic, right? I was waiting for 4 months for them to sign the contract, and they became increasingly concerned. Why weren't they? I had signed it. I'm just waiting for the counter signature paid so I could get paid. And every day there was a new story, soon, tomorrow, God willing, inshallah, tomorrow, soon, right? And finally, they pulled it, force majeure it, and it was done. And because they didn't want to. They'd already made a decision they didn't want to do the project. And so they just were jerking me around to the last possible moment they had, which was the day they had to pay me, and then they force majeure it. And so I'm sure that if the story is true, that it was sitting there on his desk, not being signed, and the deadline is approaching, I'm sure Miss Kennedy's getting agitated, and she would call Bob Iger and say, hey, can you talk to him over there? What's he doing? What are we doing here, right? I need you to talk to him. He's not taking my calls, which I'm sure he's not, right? He's not taking my calls. So can you talk to him? Which is what I would do. I would like go over to the person who has some power over him. I would go to the boss. So his
go to her friend.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just it. And look, for the people out there, oh, well, Bob Chapek on an investor call said this, and I don't care what Bob Chapek said on a public investor call when he was put on the spot. Yeah. He can't say anything else. I don't know how many investor calls people out there have listened to. I've been in that industry now for almost 20 years. I can tell you I've listened to more than a couple. At no point, or at least it's an incredibly rare occurrence, where if a CEO that is running that investor call at that point gets a question about one of his captains or her captains or lieutenants, that is in a negative light, as that was with Kennedy, that they would just throw him under the bus. I mean, that doesn't happen in that.
Doesn't happen.
There was nothing else he was going to say at that point other than, yeah, sure, we love Kathy and we hope she's here for a long time. That meant nothing. A lot of people jumped off the cliff on that one, but I'm like, that
What else? What else is he going to say?
That doesn't mean anything to
what
me
else
as somebody who's done this for 20 years.
She's fired. That's going to cause volatility in the stock market. You see, he's not going to see the frustration I've had. And I was actually having this conversation.
Disney just doesn't air their dirty laundry, folks. I mean, that's I've been trying to get that across to everybody, especially Disney. Most companies don't, but especially Disney.
Especially Disney. And it's got a lot of dirty laundry. I can tell you that from experience. And so, one of the challenges I've had, because I've been, I'm a professional working screenwriter. That's actually my job. People sort of think of me as a YouTube personality. Like you have a job. You're an investment professional. People don't realize I'm doing YouTube as
and with a law degree.
Yeah, a law degree and an MBA. So I have a job, right? I really do have a job. I really do write, and I earn money that way. And so I've been going on, and at this point, there's very few YouTubers I really want to talk to. You're one of them. Our great friends at Midnight's Edge.
And I appreciate you being here.
It's just a handful at this point because I've been going to a lot of YouTubes where I'm having these kinds of conversations. Like, look, I'm talking to somebody who doesn't understand anything, right? And it's like people are like, if I've had these conversations where it's just like, all right, where the person's like saying, if Bob Chapek doesn't speak out against Kathleen Kennedy, we're never going to be able to stop this. If Jon Favreau doesn't publicly condemn her for firing Gina Carano, I was like, what world are you in, man? That's never going to happen. Are you crazy? And I've been having these conversations. People are like, it has to be done. I'm like, okay, I'm talking to a 5-year-old. I mean, you obviously can't survive basic corporate politics working inside Staples, much less Hollywood.
Well, I mean, look, I understand people's frustrations out there. I totally get it. I really do. And I understand the desire to have that happen.
But then to actually expect that to be the rational business decision of very rich people.
And we all want it to. And look, there may come a day when that does happen, when they feel like they can, but at this level that we're talking about, generally speaking, that never happens.
That doesn't
because these people. Again, you have to think about these contracts that they sign when they're onboarded for millions of dollars in some cases. Comes with a lot of stipulations, a lot of restrictions, and non-disclosure.
Exactly.
And one of the things, especially at Disney, is if you go out there and you poo-poo on one of your coworkers, or if you, especially your executive boss at the studio or somebody else, we're not going to come out and publicly rebuke you necessarily, but don't expect any future contracts.
Well, that's the thing is, not only you'll have private retribution internally, you'll probably maybe even get fined or have some legal consequences in your contract for speaking out of turn, right? Setting that aside, that's private. The moment you do that, every other future employer is like, I'm out. This person can keep their mouth shut.
There's that concern.
Everyone's got chaos inside.
And especially with people like, in my impression of Favreau, he's very apolitical, right? He's really not on social media. He doesn't get out there. He's not a very public guy. And he's not the type that's going to jump out there and tweet stuff, because he never does. He just wants to go along and be a storyteller. So I can understand, not wanting to say this, but this is where we are at this point with KK. We don't know 100% whether or not this is true or not. We're, again, for the sake of this discussion, we're assuming it's true. It may well be. I mean, it's not being refuted.
She's gonna have
but then again, we don't know. Here's the thing: if she was renewed, I can see that. For what kind of time period, I don't know. The 3-year part of this, I'm having a little bit tougher pill swallowing.
It's implausible.
Yeah. And it may be, but it's like we said, it's like you said, it's like I said, I feel like this is 3 years of a paycheck to just get out the way. And, you can kind of finish Indiana Jones and stuff like this and save face. But at some point, 6 months from now, a year from now, she announces, oh, she's moving on to somewhere else. And that contract, just Disney, and she part ways amicably. She's trying to get out of this, leaving on her own terms without just.
And she wants, I don't think she even wants to be in this situation for 3 years, because it's 3 more years of people calling her garbage names on the internet. It's hard to take, right? It's 3 more years of, I'm sure that
which she's earned.
Yeah, but it's 3 more years of that, of being insulted on the internet by people that you despise and random YouTubers wearing masks. And I mean, it drives her crazy. This is literally like Marie Antoinette being pelted with eggs by the masses. It's insane for her to have to deal with this 3 more years of it. So setting the fact that she just wants to preserve her reputation inside of Hollywood and her dignity inside of Hollywood. But I want to give one last thing to you to think about.
Go ahead. Before we close out.
What if my thesis that she leaked this on her own and got Frank to to uplift it when no one noticed, right? But that's my thesis. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it for now, right? So if that's true, and she did that, I would believe she would have done that against Bob Chapek's wishes, because the very drama that we're seeing in the last 48 hours with agitated fans, explosions of conversations like this on YouTube, and this is not what Bob Chapek wants right now, coming off of a difficult week for the stock, right? This isn't something he wanted. That's probably why he had a gag order on the trades to even talk about her status, right? So if she did that, she went against him. And that's a problem, because Chapek doesn't like when you rebel against him. When she fired Gina Carano, it wasn't a direct attack on Chapek, but he used it to assert his power and basically take her off of Star Wars. And with, I believe, an understanding, okay, you're done. We're going to come to an arrangement, and you're going to leave with dignity, and that's it. But now she's messing with him. And the part of dignity was to keep your mouth shut. Like I was told, here's your take your payout and keep your mouth shut, when I was asked to leave. So she didn't keep her mouth shut part. She did a leak that caused a drama. Suddenly, we've seen in the last 24 hours, right after this leak, a whole slew of new articles in the same kind of fan press questioning Kathleen Kennedy. And now we're beginning to see stories coming out claiming that Patty Jenkins blames Kathleen Kennedy for the loss of Rogue Squadron, that she was given bad notes and she had to execute them, and that's got her off her own show. And now I think I just saw a headline where someone is claiming that our great director from the Last Jedi, Ryan Johnson. I'm hearing that some of these fan reports claiming that creative differences with Miss Kennedy is why his trilogy never happened. So this is what I think is happening there, because that's really bizarre for that to be coming out. It reminds me a lot of when Chapek decided, I'm going to get rid of Feige. He started little by little fan stories, and then, against Feige started coming. And then suddenly publicly you had, the Russo brothers making Feige look bad. And suddenly now you're having high level filmmakers like, Patty Jenkins and Ryan Johnson, who are still major players in this town, apparently leaking out that they didn't have a good experience with it. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. The scenario that I'm seeing is Bob called them and said, look, you got a future here. I don't think you have a future at Star Wars, but you got a future here with Disney with a lot of other stuff, both of you, right? We like you. If you want that future, I think you need to start talking about this person who's creating problems for me. In the same way you had that conversation with the Russos, saying, I think you need to start publicly saying, because
it wasn't an accident. The Russo brothers came out and basically got behind Chapek and kind of poo-pooed Feige, because those could be the two guys that could run Marvel next.
Correct. And they couldn't embarrass Feige without cover. They had to have the knowledge of that they were safe with Disney's hierarchy to do it.
Oh, because if you're the Russos, who would you love to do a movie for again? Disney.
Correct.
Everybody wants to do a movie for Disney, because Disney spends $200 million on the simplest, most ridiculous things.
And so does Patty Jenkins, and so does Ryan Johnson, right? So that's beginning. And I'm of the opinion that Bob Chapek is very angry right now. And he's decided,
you think?
And and it may very well be that not just agitated fans, he may be getting calls from some agitated investors saying, I thought you told us at our private dinner a few weeks ago that this issue had been resolved. What are we getting? This stuff is erupting again? So it's not been resolved. So aren't you in charge? That's not a call that he wants to get.
No. So, if that's happening just out there, again, this is all, we're having academic discussions and theories and talking about what could have been. Because again, this is
a plausible thing. It's a plausible.
Oh, it's totally plausible. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I want to hear what the chat has to say in terms of comments and everything, and offer your thoughts below. But Kamran, I appreciate you being here. Any other final thoughts before we check out?
No, I just want to say I think that if my thesis is right, I believe your thesis that Iger is behind this is very plausible. If my thesis is right, that Chapek did not approve of these leaks, then I think Kathleen Kennedy, for the first time, might actually be in trouble.
Well, I think your thesis and my thesis are not mutually exclusive. I think they actually work perfectly together.
Yeah,
somebody had to make the call. I don't think, if Chapek signed this, I think it was done very begrudgingly. Because again, I don't know, there might have been a stipulation in Kennedy's contract to where any kind of renewal had to be for a 3-year term. We don't know because all these things are sealed under NDAs. All we can do is give our best, most educated guesses and discuss, as we're doing today, why, if this did happen, which at this point, let's assume it did. It may very well have, and we could have been wrong all these months that she was going to get renewed, but for all the wrong reasons or right reasons, everything said she should have gone. Assuming that she is still there and will still be there for 3 years, okay, then why? So that's why this discussion is happening.
And you hit the last thing I want to say is this: you hit the pivotal thing, NDAs. An NDA also is about the existence of the contract. It's for the company to disclose the relationship. It's not for you to disclose it.
Right.
It's not your job. And so certainly in this circumstance, it would be, we'll let people know you're still here, Kathy, on our terms. And if Miss Kennedy circumvented that to get it out to some contacts, which I think she did based on what I saw with her husband boosting these things, then it suggests to me that she went against her agreement with Chapek, which will have repercussions. And I think that maybe the chess game is going to get a little uglier as it has been for Feige. So this is a surprise twist for me that I think may change the board.
Yeah, I think, just to close out, I think Iger, like I said, I think Iger had a hand in this. I don't have any doubt much in my mind, just from the plausibility factor. We know that they've been dear friends. He's been responsible for her renewals in the past, even regardless of the terrible financial performance. I think this was one last shot that Iger took, not only to, handshake his friend, Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy, but also to stick one last craw in Chapek, because Chapek was not his chosen successor. And I think it's going to be really interesting if this does pan out to be correct. What's going to happen at Disney after January 1st when Robert Iger is no longer executive chairman and chairman of the board? What changes? Who comes in? What kind of dynamics happen? So anyway, this is all stuff for you guys out there watching. Drop a comment below this video. Let us know what you think about this. But definitely before you leave, there's a link below this video to go check out Kamran Pasha on his Patreon page. Make sure you go support him. His Patreon is growing. And all these kind of discussions usually start over here on Patreon. So if you're wondering where this happens before we get on camera, this stuff happens on Kamran's Patreon. So make sure you go subscribe. And until next time, great to see everybody again. Thank you for helping us hit 2,000 subscribers. And until next time, take care.